Hi, guys, and welcome to the House Call Vet Cafe podcast. I'm Dr. Eve Harrison. I'm a full-time integrative concierge house call veterinarian in Los Angeles, and I help other vets to build their unique mobile practices on their terms. This podcast is for and by house call and mobile veterinarians, so it is meant to give our community a platform to connect, to share our stories, to lift each other up, and to support each other. Most of us work solo as lone wolves, right? So for me, it's been really powerful to be able to physically hear the voices of my colleagues from all over the world and to get a chance to feel that we truly are part of a community of very real other human beings who get it. While you may be alone in that little bubble of your own vehicle when you're on the road seeing patients, I welcome you to join our community by tuning into our own podcast when you're on your way to your next house call. Whether you're a super experienced house call vet with 30 years of experience, you're a brand new prospective house call vet just looking to get started, or you're house call curious, there will be something for you in this podcast. Each episode, you will hear interviews from other mobile veterinarians just like yourself who are doing unique and innovative things, vets who are sharing their stories, their struggles and challenges, and you can also look forward to hearing valuable information and perspectives from specialists and experts outside of our micro niche. And finally, if becoming a house call veterinarian is something that you've been thinking about exploring, or you're looking for some extra support getting your own mobile practice to feel more profitable and sustainable for you, check out the information in the show notes about my course and our above and beyond supportive private community for members only, plus our monthly group coaching sessions within the House Call Vet Academy. You can also check out my free public Facebook group, which is also called the House Call Vet Cafe, the same name as this podcast, and which is a warm and cozy community for mobile vets to support each other in professional and personal development, in creative entrepreneurship, and in friendship. So thank you guys for spending time with me today. Let's dive into the episode.
Hey everyone, today's episode is another kind of interesting format. This is a cross-posted, cross-aired podcast that I did with the ladies at Real Talk Unleashed Veterinary Podcast, which is a real-ass veterinary podcast for real-ass veterinary professionals. No sugarcoating, no bullshit, just real talk. That's their awesome tagline. I had so much fun recording this episode with these folks, and I wanted to share with you guys because it was so well received on the Real Talk Unleashed platform that I thought you guys might enjoy it as well. So this episode is called Escaping the Hamster Wheel and Unlearning the Corporate Mindset. I thought this might be a good one to follow the last episode with Dr. Mitch Lee and his discussion about prohibitions on the corporate practice of medicine doctrine. And I kind of take an approach of prohibitions on the corporate mindset. There's so much that we can do from a legislative, from a policy, from an advocacy perspective. And my favorite flavor of advocacy is addressing the mindset itself and just kind of validating people who have had these sorts of experiences and know them to be true in their lived experience. And so it's just nice to come together with other folks who feel the same way and kind of really get it. So I hope you enjoy this podcast. Check out Real Talk Unleashed as well. They have a really fun and no bullshit, no sugarcoating podcast. And I think you guys might like that as well. So I hope you enjoy this episode.
Welcome back to Real Talk Unleashed, a real-ass veterinary podcast for real-ass veterinary professionals. I am Michelle Pevahouse.
And I'm Dr. Tasha Stark.
And I'm Caitlin Sharapova.
Today, we have a very exciting guest, Dr. Eve Harrison. Dr. Eve Harrison is a seasoned full-time concierge house call veterinarian in Los Angeles. She is one of only a tiny handful of pioneers practicing true veterinary concierge medicine. Her mobile practice has been through numerous seasons and iterations of itself, including being an acupuncture-only practice, a multi-doctor practice with an IHE exclusive component, wellness only, and finally, a solo integrative concierge practice. Her passions are creative entrepreneurship, veterinary practice management, sustainability for veterinarians, boundaries, authentic communication, ethics, and releasing people who are not a good match for our practices. She is the founder of the hashtag Team Guppy, which represents solidarity in protecting independent veterinary practice ownership in light of the private equity takeover of veterinary medicine via hashtag Corporate Shark. She is also the founder of the online CE course, the House Call Vet Academy, and offers coaching and consulting to help veterinarians nourish not only their patients, but themselves by helping independent veterinarians cultivate profitable and sustainable mobile practices of their own. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Harrison.
I'm super excited to be here. I've been looking forward to this podcast for ages.
We are super excited to have you. I know that Dr. Stark had a super fun time on your podcast.
Yeah, that podcast was really fun and it was really well received too. So I'm just really excited to be able to continue that conversation and kind of take it a little bigger because I know the community wants to hear more about these kinds of subjects.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So, going into that a little bit, many veterinarians are looking to get out of clinical practice and are looking towards relief or house calls. What made you get into house calls and helping other vets start their own house call practices?
So that's a really good question for a number of reasons. I mean, you hit the nail on the head by saying that there is this sort of tidal wave of veterinarians moving from traditional practice, brick and mortar practice, into other, I guess, what you'd call non-traditional modalities of being a vet. And I actually wrote an article for the Southern California Veterinary Medical Association on this specific subject, the kind of why behind everyone's mass exodus, as you guys have probably heard about that phenomenon. And I think we're all kind of like in that exodus in our own ways, if you ask me. But I think it's a complicated issue. And I think the roots of it have been going on for a long time. I think we all know that our profession's in danger. Dr. Stark and I talked quite a bit about the dumpster fire. That is a corporate takeover of veterinary medicine and how that's really infiltrated so much of the brick and mortar aspect of how we practice. I think in general, the way we're trained sets us up to come out with fear, like we're not built up. We're broken down by the time we even get out. I always say that we hatch from the vet school egg with no boundaries, no self-esteem, no confidence, no experience. And then, by the time we're just a few years into practice, we're all kind of beaten down. And then you add on top of that the sort of corporate culture that's infiltrated our profession. And that adds a whole other level of challenge to what we do. And so I think prior to the pandemic, people were already kind of dropping off, myself included 7 years ago. I kind of hit, yeah, Natasha's raising her hand. But I mean, I hit a wall, I hit burnout just because of the nature of our profession and the personalities within it. Like we have kind of almost like a duality. Like there's the hyper empathetic and the people who bend over backwards and do anything for you and, work their asses off to do the right thing. And then there's these other people who are kind of power hungry and a little narcissistic and will build themselves up by putting other people down. And that's very much a part of our leadership, a part of our education, a part of even day-to-day interactions and our, with the community on Facebook, even to that level, right? So I think this like kind of inherent clash of types of people and types of systems within our profession really personally pushed me over the edge. Like I did a surgical residency and I dealt with a lot of these narcissists in my own education and it just really damaged me, and so I had to get out. And I was kind of at a point of saying to myself, okay, F this profession. I'm either out completely or I'm going to take it into my own hands and do it my way. And I dipped a toe into the doing it my way sort of thing. And I ended up finding myself. I found it sounds really cliche, but it was really the key. Just getting to that point of F it, there's nothing worth this. This has to stop. And I'm leaving one way or another, and it's either leaving the profession or leaving the way it is currently done. And so getting to that point and taking that leap helped me really self-actualize and recognize, hey, I'm a damn good doctor. Oh my God. Like once I start listening to myself and stop requiring a boss above me or judgy colleagues to approve what I did, and just kind of focus on that relationship between myself and my client in the home, in that little cocoon where there's nobody else to judge. There's only myself to feel, what's going on. I kind of came to a place where I felt like, wow, I can actually do this. And, after it was about 5 years into my practice that I felt really good about things and that, I was earning a good living and I just kind of owned my life again. And so from that place, I was like, wow, I really do need to share this with other people because I'm seeing other folks go through these issues. So kind of backing up also, I know it's a little long-winded. I think the pandemic really pushed things over that little precipice of where people couldn't tolerate things anymore. I'm sensitive, so I hit that point early, well before the pandemic. But then the pandemic came, and then you have entitled clients, angry people, caseloads through the roof, and then corporate trying to cash in on this, right? Like, oh, we have a problem, we have a pain point, we're going to fix it, and doing the whole lip service, trying to get people in bait and switch, and then they don't provide the real answer to the pain points, right? But they use that. And so I think all of that kind of took the whole profession by the balls, if you'll excuse my language, and just tossed it over the cliff. And I think everyone got to that point of just like, this is not okay anymore. We can't sustain this. People who had children couldn't work, so hard to the point where they were burnt out every moment. You have a family, you have to be there for those people too. And, the profession, I think, just took so much from all of us with the pandemic that I think now there's this tidal wave, like you mentioned. So thank you for mentioning that, because that's, I think, where all of this change is now happening.
Totally agree. And Dr. Stark and I have talked about this, and we've talked about this on the podcast in the past. I joined the team shortly before the pandemic, and she and I had talks about recruiting veterinarians to All Four Paws Vet Relief, one of our businesses. And I told her, this is it. The
Yeah.
pandemic is going to be the straw that breaks veterinary medicine's back, because you take an industry that is already in crisis, right? Like, we were already in a situation where we were dealing with elevated suicide rate, poor mental health, burnout, compassion fatigue, all of those things. And then you throw a deadly pandemic on top of that. And outside of you now have to worry about every interaction that you have with clients. But the corporations and the practices that were not getting on board with being curbside, that were not getting on board with protecting their staff, that were not advocating for their staff to be considered eligible for the vaccines in the very beginning, and all of these things that just show people who are already kind of burned out and stressed out that you're not important, you're not valuable. And so, I mean, we hired, I think, 20 veterinarians that first year, and I saw more and more of my colleagues going to relief or other non-traditional avenues so they could get out of clinical practice and have more control of their lives. And then, on top of that, that's not even considering the fact that our workforce is mostly women. And then
Yep.
all of a sudden in the pandemic, you have to be a teacher. You have to be you have to be a mom, you have to be a full-time employee, and you have to be a teacher for your children. So it just was too much, And so I'm not glad the pandemic happened, but I'm glad that there was sort of this, like you said, falling off the cliff, because people then realized, holy shit, this is not sustainable. I have to do something to change this for myself. And it is starting to turn the tides and putting the power back in the hands of veterinarians and veterinary professionals.
Yeah.
Dr. Eve, what do we say to, like, you and I talk about this a lot, like, we got out prior to the pandemic, like, we figured out pretty early on, that we were in toxic work environments and we got out. But I do see on like a lot of the Facebook chats, there's so many vets who are where we were, but don't have the willpower or they just don't have the balls to get out. What do we say to those veterinarians to help them understand that they can have a better life, that there is something better, and that they don't have to stay in these toxic work environments with these corporate overlords to have a successful veterinary career?
Oh man, I mean, this is the heart of it, because the fear is real. I think people don't realize that they have this power to change things. Like you said, Michelle, we were heading towards demise, but some of us hadn't reached rock bottom to know that, this is just not okay. Like, sometimes you need to get pushed so far that your body knows. Your body tells you, like, yeah, no. No to the no power. And until you have that kind of almost somatic sensation of like, this cannot be, it's all conceptual, it's up in the head. And we're like, this is bad. Yeah, I should probably quit this. Yeah, this isn't good. I think probably I'm not going to be able to do this for a long time. But that's a huge difference between being whacked over the head physically with the experience of being so badly harmed by these toxic experiences and these toxic characters. It's the same person over and over again, just in different roles and with different names. And it's this one's an MBA and this one's a DVM MBA, and this one is just the tech bro from Silicon Valley, but they're all doing the same thing, and it's commodifying us, and it's telling us we don't matter and that we're a cog in the machine to line their pockets. And until you feel that, I think until you physically feel it in your body, in your life, it's very difficult for people to make those jumps. And I think what's even more difficult is to not rationalize why it's okay. Not only do we have vets who don't want to step away, they want to excuse why it is okay and why people who feel different are wrong. And, there's a lot of that out there. And then, I also want to say that I think that it's not just that people, haven't been burned badly enough, but I also think that corporate culture is beyond the construct of just a corporate practice, right? Like, so there's the Banfields, the VCAs, the Mars, all of these that are quote unquote corporate practices. But I believe that corporate think has infiltrated the entirety of veterinary medicine, starting from vet school. So we don't even realize that we've been indoctrinated with a corporate mentality. So, and that's how we've been trained, right? That's infiltrated our very practice of medicine. Like, this is required, it's linked to ivory tower medicine, right? Where if we're not practicing that ivory tower medicine, we ourselves aren't good enough and our colleagues aren't good enough. And that leads to this sort of throwing each other under the bus. And, if you're not making production. And, for me, this showed up as feeling that because I wasn't able to see a certain number of patients a day at a certain rate, I wasn't a good doctor. Dude, that's not what doctoring is about. It's not what doctoring is about. And yet I thought right out the gate that the amount of patients I was able to see and my efficiency was the same as my doctoring ability, right? And so I think that part of the answer, Tasha, to your question is that we don't even know that our mentality is what it is as a whole profession, right? And this is not to say that some people don't have a really positive experience in corporate medicine. And it's not to say that some people don't thrive there. They might. It might be the right thing for their personality, but it's the whole mentality and the overwhelming tidal wave of corporate practice and corporate think over our whole profession that's pushing, I believe, the tidal wave of vets out of that same space, So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but, I also think that people are afraid, kind of like I mentioned in my bio. I like to encourage people to walk away from toxic situations, toxic people. Another hashtag that's my baby brainchild is hashtag Cradar. And I've heard it's kind of taken hold in some of the Facebook groups, but it's identifying not only the crazy clients, and I don't mean crazy as in mentally ill. I mean, like, subjectively, what makes you feel like you're going to go nuts if you have to deal with this person, right? And just identifying that quickly and saying no to it and pushing it out of your life. And I think people need to acknowledge their Cradar, not only for their potential clients, but for workplaces, for bosses, for colleagues. Like, turn the Cradar on, recognize this is not okay, and say no to it and walk away. I think that's also something that we don't have training, we don't have validation, we don't have support in taking those kinds of bigger steps for our own well-being and our self-protection.
That definitely answers my question. But I guess just kind of thinking about some of the things you were saying, I think there's also like a generational gap in
Yeah.
veterinary medicine. I was just looking at a Facebook post last night that a veterinarian said her boomer boss was interviewed on one of the local news stations. Did you see that post? And
No, I didn't, but I can only imagine where the boomer boss story is going to go.
absolutely. And so, he made the comment, there's not a shortage of veterinarians. There's a shortage of veterinarians that want to work. And it's like, I swear I get triggered when I hear that. And so I think, one of the things that complicates the whole tidal wave of veterinarians leaving is just that boomer mentality of you have to, work yourself to the bone. And like you said, if you're not seeing this many appointments, then you're not a good vet. You're not good enough. And so, that definitely triggers imposter syndrome. It triggers self-doubt. And then you say, gosh, am I even a good veterinarian? And then you have that same boomer boss from that mentality of the customers are always right. So the client who makes you nuts you're still forced to see that client, And
Yeah.
so, I mean, who wants to see the crazy client that always questions everything they do? So, I just think it's literally like Michelle talked about when we talked about, how the pandemic was going to break the profession. It's literally a perfect storm. And that's what I think we're in the midst of. And so, for the few of us that have gotten out and for the many people that are trying to get out, like, you know, leave. I mean, it's, don't leave the profession, but leave that toxic work environment. If you can't find a place that supports the way that you want to practice and just your beliefs, like we did, start your own shit, start your
Start your
own.
own shit. Yes.
Yeah, start your own shit.
Well, so I think a lot of it is the fear of the unknown, right? So it's like the devil you know versus the devil you don't. And I know we've talked about this before, and we see this all of the time in relief with the relief practice. A lot of these veterinarians and vet professionals are afraid of making that jump. And, I mean, relief and entrepreneurship feels less stable than, an associate position or, regular, typically clinical practice. So I think that a lot of that fear has a lot to do with why people are not making that jump and going out on their own. But I mean, we are getting there. I think a lot more people are doing it. I think, it's just a matter of trying it. And so I think that what we do at All for Pause is we let people do trial shifts. We show them, hey, like you can have a regular paycheck. You can work at these clinics because there's such a high need right now.
So, Caitlin, it's funny you said that because I know when I first started on my own, my parents both worked for, the government and those were like considered safe jobs. And so, my mom, I remember telling her, like, hey, I'm going to start my own relief practice. And she thought, gosh, I mean, that's going to be so unstable. But one of the things that I quickly realized that being a relief vet on my own had more stability than working as an associate at these practices. I mean, number one, they can walk in any given day and tell you to kick rocks. I mean, one of the practices in our area recently, within the last 3 to 4 weeks, they walked in, they gave their staff a 48 hours notice that they would not have jobs. And so everything that, I literally told my mom, I looked at her and I said, I'm going to put my trust in myself. I'm going to trust myself over these MBAs and suits that literally walk in. They don't care that I have, a child with special needs. They don't care if I have a mortgage to pay. They gave them literally veterinarians, a veterinarian I know that moved here from several states away just for this job, didn't even give him the decency to say, hey, we're going to reformat, we're going to redo this practice. Gave him 48 hours. I literally have been on my own for 10 years as an entrepreneur, now as a serial entrepreneur. And let me tell you, I have more of a sense of security now than I ever did when I worked for private practitioners. Because again, it's a, husband-wife couple. You don't know what their finances look like. You don't know if your paycheck is going to clear a corporation. You don't know if you're going to get the 48-hour notice that you no longer have a job. So for anybody out there who's listening to the podcast who feels like being an associate is more of a secure position versus being on your own, you're fooling yourself. And feel free to reach out to me on how to get yourself started because you would do better on your own. And again, lots of other people have started on their own. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's help out there in the veterinary community. We're all very willing to help you get set up, but take the upper hand. And this is probably the one time in this profession that we're going to have the upper hand. So, I look at the salaries, what they're offering for veterinarians. This is our time. There's not going to be another time where we have this much of the upper hand.
It's very much our time. I agree with that so very much. We got the pandemic puppies. We're so in demand right now. And the way I kind of see it is I used to be very afraid myself about taking that leap. It was a concern for a lack of a stable paycheck, but it was also a concern for like, I don't know how to do this. The regulations intimidate me. I don't know what licenses, what permits. And it was that place of sort of almost desperation. Like, I want to do this so bad, but I don't know how. And I'm afraid and, afraid of the money, afraid of all of it. And it was that very place that I just kind of want to put a word out to to caution people. It was that very place that got me really screwed. And I had a corporate house call company, a startup run by, these tech bro suits. who capitalized hardcore on my fear and my desire to get out and to change things and to take my life back into my own hands. And they said all the right words. They knew all the pain points. They'd done their market research. They knew exactly what I wanted to hear. And they said, your life is going to be so much better. We know about the suicide problem in veterinary medicine, and we're going to change everything for you. They pressed all the buttons that all of us need to hear. You're going to have freedom. You're going to only have to see this number of patients a day, which in retrospect was an insane number of patients to see on a house call basis. But I got really badly taken advantage of. Felt I lost a part of myself. I dumped my brain out to these people, and, I got paid a cup of coffee, for them to pick my brain, basically. And then the whole company went down in flames when they got sued by another vet. And so it was really a fun time, but I felt deeply taken advantage of. And if I had had the support that I like to provide and that you provide, Tasha, for helping people get started and do their own thing, this wouldn't have happened. And I could have started on the right foot, and I could have recognized my own inherent ability to do things on my terms and to take the moment that was mine, right? Instead, I got stepped on and squashed and invalidated and all sorts of things. But, I still hurt from that experience. I don't know if you can even hear it in my voice, but I still get so triggered just thinking about that. And I think at this point, there are resources like what you do and what I do. And it makes me really happy to know that our moment is here and there is the support to be able to move forward. And, so the not knowing what to do and the being afraid from a logistic perspective doesn't have to be a thing. And then I also wanted to address the financial instability question. I think that there's a ceiling when you work for another company. When it's your business, there's no ceiling. The sky is the limit. I need more money for something. I hit the gas pedal. I know how to do that because my business is set up and I'm bringing in the money bags, like that's a possibility. And there's no cap to what I can bring in and no limit to how I can structure my lifestyle so that if it's not money I need, but time, I can make that happen too, right?
I think it all comes down to education, and that's going to be a good segue into my next question. But one of the things that I wanted to say is that even today, we get emails at All for Paws Vet Relief that's like, do you have somebody available tomorrow? Do you have somebody that can cover a shift today? And I understand that that is a need that happens in veterinary hospitals when somebody calls out. But it's so bizarre to me that clinics or people actually think that like relief veterinarians are just sitting around waiting for the phone to ring. How are you paying your bills if you're doing that, right? Like all of our doctors are booked 6 to 8 weeks in advance. They work as much or as little as they want to. And because there are so many practices that are looking to hire right now, like this is the perfect time for veterinarians who are interested in pursuing relief to do so. But again, I think it comes down to education and changing the perception because, maybe that's what relief used to look like, but that is not what relief looks like anymore. And more veterinarians are using that as the way to control their schedule and provide consistent relief. And sometimes that looks like going to the same practice 2 or 3 days a week, but as a relief veterinarian so that you have that control. You don't have to work under their direction as to how many patients you need to see or how much production you need to make or whatever the case may be. You're the one in the driver's seat. You're the one who writes the contract and so on and so forth.
Hi, my name is Jonathan Lau. I'm the founder of O3 Vets. One of the challenges of being a mobile veterinarian is that you have a more limited toolbox to draw from. At O3 Vets, we put a powerful tool into your toolbox by providing ozone therapy equipment designed specifically to help the mobile veterinarian treat those tough cases. Ozone works as a redox molecule to help decrease inflammation and improve cellular communication. This has an incredibly beneficial effect on a variety of conditions, as demonstrated through the hundreds of scientific studies available. If you would like to join thousands of veterinarians who've experienced the power of ozone therapy, you can visit o3vets.com or call us at 517-925-8148. If you mention this ad, you'll get access to our online training course with the purchase of your ozone equipment.
As far as, educating and giving people this information, because I'm sure that many of our listeners are looking for that life raft, looking for that way out, that ability to control their own schedule. I would love for you to tell us a little bit about your House Call Academy.
Yeah, thank you for asking. So this is my baby, light of my life. I took all of the pain from the experiences I'd had and the being taken advantage of and the not being able to find myself professionally and feeling desperate and lost. And I turned that into something where I could give back the success that I had and the lessons that I learned the hard way in getting to the point where my own house call practice was very successful and sustainable and profitable and enjoyable. And, I just felt myself in it. I just felt this is me. This is really me for the first time in my entire professional career since before vet school that I recognized myself again. And I just felt like, hot damn. I'm also seeing that all these people are kind of learning about this type of practice and want to know more about it. And I see myself and all of these people who are kind of anxious and nervous. Like, is this something I can do? Is this something I should do? Will I be able to support myself doing it? And, I just like thought back to myself in those moments. And I was like, that's the point where I got taken advantage of by that company, who became national. And I couldn't for a long time Google my own name without them coming up. And that hurt me so badly. And so that sort of encouraged me and gave me that fire to want to teach people. I'm the type of person, I don't want to manage anyone else and I don't want to be managed. I'm kind of my own person. I'm reading this book right now called The Rebel Witch, Carve the Craft That's Yours Alone. And I'm like, yeah, that's me. So I was like, I have so much to give back. I don't want to employ people. I don't want to own people or manage them, but I want to teach. I want to share this and I want to empower them to do it themselves and kind of create their own unique house call practices so they can find themselves again in the practice of veterinary medicine and entrepreneurship. And so that was my inspiration. And this was kind of as the pandemic was unfolding. So that tidal wave, I was observing it happen. I was like, yeah, it's the right time for this. And so I created this course. It's over 30 hours of CE, race approved on demand content, and people can access it whenever they want for a year. There's also monthly group coaching calls so we can really kind of on a one-to-one basis, face-to-face way, tailor things to their own unique needs and their own challenges of their demographics and things like that. And then we've also got an exclusive Facebook community so we can handle things and questions that come up in real time. So it's been going well and it's been really a joyful experience seeing vets come in terrified and then come out like making big money and just feeling empowered again. And it's just been a beautiful thing. And I feel like to me, I mean, I don't know how we can reverse the steamroller of corporate medicine or these people coming into our profession to take advantage of us and commodify us to line their own pockets. I don't know that we can directly take them down on the whole. But as my contribution to the movement, I feel is empowering the people who want to remain in control of their own lives and who have some shred of integrity of what it means to be a veterinarian and to combine that entrepreneurship with bringing out what it means to be a veterinarian to them and expressing that in our own unique ways.
So one of the things that you and we both talked about, like corporate sponsorships and just with the House Call Academy, you don't take corporate sponsorships. So tell me a little bit more, as I know, I kind of know your story about corporate sponsorships, but tell me like why you chose to do that and how you get around that.
Yeah. So this is a good question, and thank you for asking it because I really pride myself on being one of, if not the only conference provider that doesn't accept corporate sponsorship. And I think that it's a challenge and it's kind of a new thing that I'm doing on principle. Corporate has harmed me in so many ways. My residency was corporate. It damaged me so much. That was the closest I've been to like needing hospitalization from my mental state. And it was just so damaging. Corporate think, right? That house call corporation that took advantage of me. Every aspect of my professional life has been harmed or damaged in some way by the corporate influence, whether it's the corporate think, the corporation themselves, how corporate turns our colleagues against each other. And I just am so passionate about not wanting that on any of my platforms. I think when you have a platform, and you guys know this, there comes a responsibility as well. What you put your name behind gets out to the world, right? And I feel like I've worked really hard to build my platform. I've invested time, I've invested money, heart and soul, blood, sweat, and tears, all of it. And I think for me to then turn around and accept money from those same companies that have harmed me so badly and who actually are the fire that caused my platform to exist in the first place, to turn around and accept money from them would be completely hypocritical. And I think it would be against every grain of my being, to be honest, And I think it's hard. It's a real challenge not taking that big corporate money. Of course, I could have a much bigger, fancier, shiny conference and provide all the bells and whistles. And I could have, a huge in-person thing at like SeaWorld or something. There's so many things I'd love to do if we had $1 million or more from corporate. But we don't have that kind of money. And so we've got to get creative and partner with smaller businesses, smaller solopreneurs. That's who I take sponsorship from. And I use my platform, my conference, my podcast and everything to give back to people who are fighting the same fight that I'm fighting. Right. And so we kind of mutually help each other. And, the last thing I would want is for, one of these big companies to overshadow a smaller company that's trying to develop or, vet owned or vet tech owned. And here you have these like Wall Street people coming in and making a big scene in the conference. And the little guys, the team guppy, doesn't get a chance to be seen or heard. And so to me, it's a matter of integrity. It's a matter of sticking with my principles and just honoring what I believe in and what I want to put out there on my platform. No amount of money is going to make me use my megaphone to promote corporate, Hope that makes sense.
Do you think that vet schools should walk away from corporate sponsorship? I mean, I talked with the dean I went to Virginia Tech, and I recently talked to the dean about this, but, you said earlier how, yeah, we are corporatized in vet school. I mean, when you walk in from day one, you are given lunch sponsored by, fill in the blank for every single thing that's there. And even if it's subliminal, they are definitely exposing you to their brand for the reason of you promoting their brand once you get out of school. So what are your thoughts? Do you feel like vet schools, because I personally do, I personally feel like they should either, like I'll see sponsored and I'm just like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, I mean, this is the company that's literally shitted on veterinarians and pretty much said that we know nothing about nutrition, but our guy in a suit, does. And so, just what are your thoughts on where vet school should limit it or not have it at all as far as corporate sponsorship?
I mean, you hit it on the head. I mean, I very much agree with that. I think vet school should be primarily independent, ideally. I mean, I think all education should be without financial input of that caliber. I think it's hard to do that because that money has to come from somewhere. So I understand why big conferences and schools take that big corporate money because it's big money. It's big money, really big money. And, I've personally chosen to take the harder path and get creative about providing information that's not tainted by Wall Street,
I feel like, we talked about corporate influence and involvement in veterinary schools. And I feel like right now, especially, corporations are just waiting outside of the gates of veterinary schools, like drooling over the veterinarians that are, emerging and graduating and, waiting to chew them up and spit them out. So I'd love to know what your advice is to veterinary students who are going to be joining the workforce in the next couple of years.
Yeah. So regardless of whether a person is graduating and planning to do an internship, and almost all of the internships are corporate, whether someone's planning to go and do a specialty, all the residencies are corporate, right? That all of that is indoctrinated with the corporate thinking. So whatever it is that folks are planning to do when they get out of school, I want people to know that you can change. I want you to have an open mind that whatever's been presented to you as the only way to do things, or the next step that you have to take, or the number of patients that you have to see per day, or whatever it is that you've been told or that's been put into your head about what it means to be a good vet, what it means to be a real vet, whatever it is that's holding you back in your imposter syndrome, because we all graduate with imposter syndrome. Please entertain the idea that it may not be true. please try to remember who you were before vet school, because that's what I lost. I lost my memory of who I was, my self-confidence, my understanding I'm a competent person. I'm a caring, empathetic person, and I work hard to do the right thing. I'm an ethical person, you know? And so if someone or some environment, whether that's a colleague or a work environment or a client, is telling you otherwise, I want to welcome or invite you to think, is that really true? Is that really true? And maybe, is there another path for me to be able to reconnect with my sense of knowing I'm good enough as a vet, as a human, and to just be brave and go down that path, see what it might be, and know that there is support out there for you. So that's kind of my long-winded advice to new grads. I wanted to revisit that corporate can be damaging, but again, it's corporate mindset that I think is what concerns me. And it's even independent veterinary practices can carry that corporate mindset and still harm vets, especially new grads. And I also wanted to back up further and say that our vet colleagues who work in these corporate practices or who are employees working under these paradigms are not our enemy. I want to be really, really clear about that, because I don't want to harm or alienate our colleagues. We're in this together, and we're struggling, we're fighting. We may not have the tools yet to figure out how to get out, or we may not have hit that rock bottom point where the toxicity is so bad that we can't lie to ourselves anymore. And so I want to send support to all of our colleagues, as long as they're nice and not throwing each other under the bus, as long as they're not dickheads, because there are dickheads. But that's different from just kind of nice run-of-the-mill vets who are working within that corporate paradigm, whether it's actually a corporate practice or an independent practice with a corporate mindset.
I love that. And, I'm definitely on the same page as far as, not every experience is indicative of the entire experience, right? I know several people who have or continue to work at corporate practices, and they're very happy there. I think that it has a lot to do with what the local leadership in the hospital looks like, and, not so much what the senior leadership looks like, but what the local leadership looks like. And some of these corporations are doing things better, or they're trying to make changes and make things better for veterinary professionals because they understand it affects their bottom line. But for sure, their number one priority is the bottom line. And so, where the problems start to happen in these hospitals is when we're choosing profits over people. And so I totally agree with you that it's not black and white, and there are shades of gray, and my experience may not be somebody else's experience in the same hospital even.
I 100% agree. I don't think that the toxicity is exclusive to corporations. I think that there are plenty of toxic people in private practices as well. We see it every day. But I love that you're highlighting that we don't want to alienate our colleagues who are in those corporate practices, because they're dealing with the same things that we are every single day. And what we should be doing, is bringing people together and trying to fight this issue collectively, because that's the only way that it's going to work. The only way that we're going to be able to make changes in this industry is if we're all working together against the same thing. And, we don't want to pit anybody against each other. We don't want anyone to feel excluded at all. So,
Yeah, it's tough because there are people who work in corporate because they were literally pipelined right into it from school.
Mhm.
Like, I did a corporate internship, I did a corporate residency, and then by then I was indoctrinated and to think that that way of practicing and that way of being as a clinician was the way. And then you don't even see it anymore when you hop into your next corporate job. That's just normal. Like, you're trained that this is normal. So first of all, it's normalized. It's not so bad, or that's how we think. And it's all around us. It's almost impossible at this point in some areas to have a job that isn't corporate, right? Like, some of us are just in situations where corporate has offered us the money that we just desperately need, or, our family depends on something that is linked to this corporate hospital in this location, or we've signed a non-compete and we can't get out of it now, right? Like, if we leave, we can't work anywhere else. So there are people who are trapped in that way. And so, I think there's while some people may thrive, and that's great, if they're surrounded by just good people, good people can work in corporate. Bad people can also work in corporate too, right? And it sort of provides a framework where people who are power hungry or narcissistic can rise to the top. So the system is just a little bit more prone to that kind of thing by nature, I believe. But there's just so many reasons why a person might either enjoy being there or be there, even though they don't want to be there and they're trapped. And so I wanted to just sort of acknowledge that and say that we are colleagues, and my love to all of you guys as well. It's not your fault. It's not your fault.
For sure. For sure. We definitely are all in this together, no doubt. And we're all in the dumpster fire just hanging out. Somebody get the water hose.
There's a cauldron of
Yes,
dumpster crap.
absolutely. For sure. So I was on your podcast. I had a great time, but I wanted to just ask you a little bit about your podcast, how you got started. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So my podcast has been a really enjoyable thing. It's been going on for, I believe, about a year and a half now. It initially started because when I created the House Call Vet Academy, I wanted to include the voices of other House Call Vet colleagues who were experienced in things that I don't do or might have even more experience than I do, kind of as a tip of the hat to the community. Like, here I am teaching, but I know that I didn't invent this. I know that everyone who came before me and has been doing house call practice for years and years, I wanted to give them a voice as well, not only as a tip of the hat to the colleagues, but also to provide that for students to see, hey, there's so many ways you can do this. My way is getting a little bit of a heavier emphasis because I'm teaching the course, but there's so many, you can do in-home euthanasia only, you can do acupuncture only, you can do concierge medicine, you can practice rural or you can practice urban, you can practice out of your shitty little Honda, or you can practice out of a giant tremendous mansion of a LaBoite, like there's just so many ways you can do it, and people love what they're doing in all of these different categories. And so I wanted to give people a taste of that. And then those conversations became so enjoyable, and it felt good to be able to give a voice to colleagues who are doing similar things and kind of share my platform with those people. So not only people who have more experience than I have and a little more claim to, like, hey, I've been doing this for ages, but also people who are kind of coming up in the house call world, and let them have a minute to shine and share their experiences and get a moment in the spotlight as well. And then I guess there was a tiny little bit of me that was like, okay, there are these like old school haters who are going to be like, why is she teaching everyone about house call? I've been doing this for 30 years. You better believe there are people who have literally said those words to me. And truth be told, a tiny little bit of fear that was like, well, let me throw them a bone. And it turns out that it was just a really overall a positive thing. And so thank you, haters, for inviting me to open the stage a little bit and create something that is open to the whole community, because I think ultimately that was for the best.
Like I say,
Oh,
let your haters be your motivators for sure.
yeah.
I love that. And I think again, it kind of echoes the message that you were talking about earlier and that we've all, that we've said multiple times. I think we're all in this together. I think, Caitlin has mentioned this a handful of times on various different episodes where if we're focusing on each other and we're shitting on each other and we're, what are you doing? And we're being toxic to one another, we are not focused on where the real problem is. And the real problem lies with the corporate, or like you said, corporate mentality takeover of our industry that is changing the focus of what we all got in this industry to do, which was take good care of our patients, right? Like if you take good care of your patients and you take good care of the clients that are attached to them, then the money will come. Everybody should be happy. But when it gets to that level of, well, that's not enough. Now you need more. Now you need more. Now you need more. That's the kind of toxicity. And that's when we start fighting with one another and everybody's so frustrated and has compassion fatigue. And so then you snap at your coworker and they're talking about you. It's just this vicious cycle. What is your advice to current veterinarians or other veterinary professional support staff who are fed up with the way that the industry is going? What advice would you give to them on how they can make a significant change in their daily lives and their quality of life?
I would say take matters into your own hands. Don't be afraid to own your profession, own your life, own your income. Go out on your own. If you need help, there's resources. There's Tasha, there's me. Check out relief work, check out house call practice. leave where you're at. Above all, get out of that toxic place. Don't be afraid to step away from what it is. Sometimes that feeling of being trapped, sometimes it's real. Sometimes we truly are trapped legally, financially. But I think more often than the feeling of being trapped is a mental construct that we've got this sort of learned helplessness that's like, oh, I can't do that. I can't do that. And so I think I want to invite people to ask themselves, is that really true again, that I can't do that? That being leaving where you're at now to either start your own thing or find a group of like-minded professionals to work with or work for and just move, keep it moving, keep it changing. If you're in a place where you're freaking miserable, move, change, shift, pivot. You might not find the right answer immediately, but you will get there. And you certainly won't find it by staying exactly where you are.
That's amazing. Thank you. So I have like one and a half final questions. So the first one is, are you team pink starburst or team yellow starburst? We kind of started this at AVMA last year when we had people voting because, we're pink and it's like this whole thing on social media now where it's like team pink versus team yellow. So what would you prefer?
I'm hardcore team pink starburst for sure.
And we would also like to know how our listeners can support the work you're doing and where can they find you online? I know we talked about some resources that you have available.
Thank you so much for asking that. So folks can check out the House Call Vet Academy at www.thehousecallvetacademy.com or also on my website, www.dreveharrison.com, where you can also check out my podcast, which is the House Call Vet Cafe, the House Call and Mobile Vet Virtual Conference. And I also have a free business plan for house call vets specific for house call practice. So if anyone wants to check that out, you certainly can. You can also check me out on Instagram, the House Call Vet Academy, and the Facebook page, the House Call Vet Academy as well. So I wanted to let everyone know about a really cool book that just came out that I read cover to cover in like 2 hours. It's like, how many pages is it? It's long. It's 291 pages and I read it in 2 hours. Like I blasted right through this because I was like, oh my God, I feel so heard and so seen and so, filled with ideas and inspiration. And it's called If I Betray These Words, Moral Injury in Medicine and Why It's So Hard for Clinicians to Put Patients First by Wendy Dean, MD, with Simon Talbot, MD. This book is just a little bit of a peek into human medicine and its corporatization and the moral injury that has occurred in human physicians and the human medical sphere. And I think it's a little bit about what is to come, what we can do about it. And I think there's just some real pearls and wisdom in there. And that this book has been very much on my mind. And I wanted to encourage folks to check it out, see if it speaks to them. And that also speaks to your question about what can people do. There's some really good ideas in here as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us. You have been so wonderful to talk to. And I think that we've gone over a lot of very hot topics in vet med right now that a lot of people are interested. And I think also, like we talked about, people are looking into what their options are in vet med. And so I think, that this will provide a lot of insight to them. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your platform with me. I know we stirred up a good bit of shit here, and we might get some shit slung right back at us.
It's all good. We're up for it.
We're used to it, right?
That's right.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much.
Yeah, it would not be the first shitstorm, and it will definitely not be the last, but that's okay because, at the end of the day, everybody doesn't have to agree on, what they feel like the way out of this mess is, as long as we get the people talking about the mess, right? And about looking for ways to find the way out of the mess. So one of the things that you said about, well, why should, with your podcast, why should you be doing this? I think we had the same issues where we were like, we don't know necessarily that we're the solution at all to the problem, right? But I think that there's a problem. And I think that we have the balls to stand up and say, fuck this. This is not how we want to live. And this is not what we want our industry to be. And when we think about where our industry is going to be 5 years out, the way that it's going now, it's terrifying to us. And we're thinking about the patients who are not going to have access to care, and the veterinary support staff that are not able to make a living wage, and the veterinarians who are taking their own lives because of client bullying or crippling debt or whatever the case may be. It's about starting the conversation and bringing light to it. So I just really appreciate all the work that you're doing, and I appreciate you taking the time to come and meet with us today.
Amen. Same to you guys. I appreciate what you guys do so much.
And like I say, Michelle, like if not us, then who? So I think that's our kind of our why for why we decided to take this journey. Because again, if not us, then who?
Right.
And if you don't like what we're saying, make your own fucking podcast.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the House Call Vet Cafe. If you enjoyed this episode, then hit the subscribe or follow button on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts so you never have to miss an episode. This podcast is made specifically for you, so don't be shy if you'd like to reach out and let me know your thoughts on this episode. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook as The House Call Vet Academy, where I also share more valuable content. If you're interested in learning more about consulting for house call vets or the House Call Vet Academy online course and community, please click on the link in the show notes. Have an amazing rest of your day, and I can't wait for you to join us for our next episode of the House Call Vet Cafe.